let's go. All right, we're going to kick this off. And as I said, we've got two other wonderful gentlemen with here. Chris Scheid, co-founder of MyCarrier, and the one who currently enslaves me for W-2 welfare. I got Joe Magee. Joe, where did you come from? I know where you came from, but nobody else does.
Yeah, so joined MyCarrier about a year ago through an acquisition, through Chris and Taylor's hard work of purchasing my company, which is called Freight Payment Solutions, and I'm located in Los Angeles, California.
Now, payment seems easy. I even paid my Verizon bill on the way to work this morning because my card expired. But in the world of freight payments, I know it not to be. You get an invoice per shipment. It's not even like parcel where you get like a nice consolidated, this is everything I shipped in 1 week bill. It's like 3 PDFs, maybe 4 PDFs per invoice. You got to look through all this stuff. You might not even be matching it to find out that you're overpaying. You might not even know why you're overpaying because accounting doesn't even look at this. So yeah, Joe, payments is simple, and I totally see why you started a company in the logistics industry around payments.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's the most interesting problem I think I've ever experienced in my life. And I've actually come to understand the problem through my father, who's actually worked in air cargo for 5 decades. And he's done air cargo and does ocean freight as well out of the Long Beach and LA ports. So yeah, it's an incredible challenge. It's super fascinating. And at the heart of it, it's actually a data problem. It's a handshake between two parties.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to provide a service. You're going to owe me money for that service. And getting it right and understanding the terms and getting paid on time to keep the supply chain moving is the crux of the issue.
Well, and then Scheid, you come from a different side of the fence where it's uber important for that side of the fence and 3PLs and managing your payables. But I don't want to say it's easier. It's definitely a different beast on that side of the fence. And then you come over here, we start this Shipper Direct platform. There's a huge need for it. And I think you have some great experience on that side of the fence. Joe has it on the forwarding side of the fence, but this is really a new frontier that you guys are both kind of pushing in. What are some of the lessons learned or some of the lumps that, we've taken early on pursuing this endeavor, thinking, oh yeah, we'll get a payment solution in there. This will be way easy. It all makes sense.
Yeah, it's not as easy as it looks, right? So, like Bobby alluded to, back when I was on the other side of the world, right, in the brokerage space, spent a lot of time thinking about this. One of the departments I was fortunate enough to run wasn't the funnest, but was invoice resolution. So, was really focused on the accuracy of the rating and pricing, but then whatever happened out there in the real world, right, the reclass, reways, accessorials, we're having to account for all of that and build so many systems and processes around that. Now, in the brokerage space, we're solving it from one master account. We don't have this complexity of servicing so many shippers that have their own direct accounts, own direct relationships. So the technology challenge was so much greater we've been working on. Some of you might be familiar with, we rolled out a product a couple of years ago called My Invoice Hub, and that's set upon solving a lot of those problems. But with the limitations of technology and where we were at, there's only so much we could do to be able to make it accessible. So thank you to all of our customers that are using that product, but we could only make it accessible to certain customers based off of the just onboarding and requirements and integrations to make those systems work. So the exciting part of where the journey's gone is with the advent of technology, especially around AI, and just the amount is democratized the ability to consume data, import data, analyze data. Really, when I'm talking data, I'm talking invoice and different ways of getting it and comparing it to quotes. It's really allowed us to do some cool things behind the scenes to make it more accessible. And that goes hand in hand with the payments because obviously you can't pay a shipment without an invoice. And that invoice parsing and ingestion has been crucial. So I'm really excited at the milestone we're at with what we're talking about today is payments, but all the foundation work that's been laid over the last 2 years of making the software more accessible to everyone.
And Joe, what have you seen? Because you come from, I think, more of a forwarder background. And I think you come from an environment where a lot of it is one shipment equals one invoice, a lot of one-to-one reconciliation. And then you come over here to LTL And I don't think you'd spent a lot of time in LTL, but I think when you got in here, you were like, holy smokes, talk about a problem that needs to be solved because of the amount of transactions and then the complexity nested within each transaction is just through the roof.
Yeah. I started this journey when I read a quote that said every 24 hours, $140 billion was in dispute in the global supply chain.
That's crazy.
And when I met Chris, maybe 2 years ago, he said, oh, you think that disputes and accessorials and extra fees are an issue in air and ocean cargo? Wait till I explain what less than truckload is.
Yeah.
So I really grasped onto the problem of variable fees, changing invoices, trying to determine who owes what when, and just recognize that the LTL space there's a magnitude of errors and exception management that is really, really hard to control. So digitizing the payment, digitizing the invoice, and then just reconciling those bits and bytes with computers as opposed to paper and humans is going to make this problem much more solvable.
Well, what I love about how we're going about it is we've got a good network and density of customers. And I think we're attacking the problem that exists on both fronts. One, and you'll hear Chris say it a lot, there's no ubiquitous or there is no solution that covers a vast majority of the market, right? And not that ours covers like this huge majority of it, but you have enough there to where it starts mattering to the carriers and the shippers that are using it. So I love how we're solving it upfront and downstream. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are if you're a shipper on trying to manage this yourself without any tools? Because you've been on a lot of calls now. You've been exposed to this for months.
Yeah. I think the fact that the invoice is a handshake between two parties that is evolving based on the attributes of the freight and the service provided. So at the destination on a quote, it might say this rate's going to be determined on X, Y, or Z. Well, when the freight actually arrives, ABC happened.
Yep.
And that now needs to be accounted for in the invoice. And that makes the payment terms and dynamics all that more challenging. So if you don't digitize all of these pieces of information, it makes it infinitely more complex to manage with people and paper and just shuffling things between different systems. So digitizing payments, I think, is going to be the crux that really solutionizes the ability for shippers to be partners with their carriers.
Yeah. Now, and Chris, I'll let you chime in on this one because I've talked to a lot of shippers, spent a lot of time on the road. You talk to a lot of shippers. I don't think there's one that's not aware that this problem exists, but I think a lot of them are just, they're like, they're just beaten into submission of like, this is just the way it's going to be. It's always been this way. I'm always going to have discrepancies. I just got to kind of roll with it. It's the nature of the beast. What do you kind of say to shippers that maybe have that attitude or the morale's a little beaten down? What do you think that we're doing to give them the benefit of these tools and how they can leverage them to say, hey, I don't have to be beaten down like this. I can actually win in this environment. Maybe if I just had a better car on this racetrack. Like,
you're absolutely right. While I was working with Joe or analyzing this space, I can't tell you how many different shippers I talked to. And there was variations on the process, but it was relatively similar across them. There hasn't been technology out there to make this accessible, to be able to do something else in the status quo. So you can't really expect it. We surveyed our customers. We looked out there to see how, when we set upon, building out this technology, what they were doing. And over 50% of our customers responded they were still getting their invoice via mail. The other little less than 50% were getting it via email, and we had one respondent that came back and said they were receiving their invoices electronically and had taken the time to set that up. So we just get how inaccessible some of that technology was to these shippers, and we saw these processes emerge where you had to create manual, paper, physical processes out of the lack of available solutions. So we see so many times you get the invoices in, it sits on a desk anytime there's an exception. Who's in charge of checking it to see if it matched? What sales order does it even go to? So much time comparing these records. So we looked at how can we start digitizing this from the forefront, all the way from you are typing up a bill of lading, right? You are executing that at every point in our process, in the industry, things are going from paper to computer to paper. It's crazy. So you're typing information into a computer, turning to a paper bill of lading that the carrier then is typing it in there. generating an invoice, putting it back to paper, mailing it to you. You type that in to print a paper check with a paper remittance, mail it to the carrier, and the carrier types that remittance back into their system. We have focused on from all the way from the beginning to the end, that just be ones and zeros moving between the shipper and the carrier. That's creating the accuracy and the ability to manage this. Because obviously there are accessorials, there are additional charges, there are times the weight's wrong, the class is wrong, but there's also times in which these paper manual processes fall apart as well. So removing that, but also creating the ability to automate the rest of it, you're just managing by exception. I mean, we see and talk to carriers with customers as high as 30% exceptions over on average. We've seen customers as high as 80% of exceptions from quote to invoice. But we've seen customers with the My Invoice Hub that's out there for some of our bit larger clients be able to really drive down those percents after they adopt. So we look forward to bringing this to the masses in parallel with payments, because payments is that last bit. So now when you pay the carrier, you're not just sending a manual check, you're paying all your carriers seamlessly. It's accurate. And that's where the name Precision comes in, is that digital remittance is going out to any of those carriers supporting it, so that now when they apply that cash, it's not a clerk having to type in off your check remittance of what pros you intended to pay, or if you did include the pro, right? That's another number you have to track in your accounting system. We can handle all that seamlessly.
And, you know, one of the things that I've seen really transpire, and I think this is going on 20 plus years in LTL for me, is that probably in the last 5 years, I've seen LTL carriers double down and outpace the shipping community with regard to their investment in technology, right? Their scales, their dimensioners, their collection of this data, what they do with this data. And at the end of the day, it's all in the pursuit of improved revenue. But I think in that pursuit, it's also created chaos on the customer experience side, because the customers aren't equipped with tools yet to better, you know, manage this up front. And we're in a bit of a chaotic state within LTL. Joe, what do you think that you've seen on the carrier side? Because we've covered the shipper side a little bit here, and I think you and I were even on a call in the first round of interviews, and a carrier would be ecstatic if they had a shipper, a larger shipper, I don't care what size, that was paying them on, what is it, an EDI, is it an 810 or 820?
820.
820. And you would just question and be like, and you're sure that's the best way? And they'd be like, oh yeah, this is the bee's knees of like collecting money right here. And I think it's because they've never seen on that anybody automate payments into them away. A broker can't quite do that, right? Single payer option for the most part on a majority of the blanket tariffs. One payment goes out, but then they have all this CSP managed stuff that could go to freight audit companies. So these carriers were just, I remember they're like, yeah, that would be awesome if you can give me an 820. Could you do that? And you're just like, what if there was better ways?
Yeah.
You could just see them thinking about this. But, you know, there's an appetite on both ends, because this is a bloody process. Tell me about what you saw when you kind of lifted the hood on some of those calls that the carriers have to, you know, incur workload now.
Yeah, I think when carriers are starting to accelerate their digitization of their back office, shippers are not yet ready to take on how accurate and maybe how real time some of this rating is going to be. So the MyCarrier platform now can manage that from quote to cash. We're receiving all those inputs. When the quote is originated out of our system, we're the system of record that's going to have the most amount of information around that transaction. So we're going to be able to surface a lot of those insights, bring those accessorials to the invoice in real time versus having to wait for this like crazy cyclical paper mess that's been happening. And I think that, you know, shippers and carriers need to ask the question, what is the most optimal way that I can transact with my carrier partners and my carrier shippers, or my shipper partners? Because if we continue to go down this status quo, then we're all going to just be writing paper checks all the time, and we're all going to be delayed, and we're going to be overdue, and it's just going to be a complete mess. So as carriers accelerate their technology, shippers need to also adopt new technology, facilitating payments. That just makes a better transaction all around.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest things I've seen shippers try to adopt lately is dimensioners. I think they're getting better. I think if you did a really good job with the old tape measure, you could still get there. But I've seen shippers have gaps on just collecting accurate DIMs. Now, Chris, you get the benefit here, working here, doing a lot of work with the NMFTA. Not only are carriers doubling down on technology, the path we're going forward down and have been with MyCarrier is, as you say, democratize or open that access up to any customer of any size to have the best experience when working with these carriers, and we can uniform that process. But what are you seeing that the industry's doing working with the NMFTA to better standardize what we're dealing with, right? Because one of the biggest challenges we face as a company, quite honestly, and we're in rooms and meetings every day, and you've seen this since you've come on board, Joe, is how do we be a translation layer for the industry? Because you could have 80 different LTL carriers that darn sure aren't doing it even close to the same way in several different categories.
Yeah, I think this is an exciting time. I'm marking 15 years in the LTL industry this year. So seeing where it's come, I always thought technology was pretty much just around the corner, but we're seeing the catalyst of it. Just talking to the public carriers, but the private carriers are doing a tremendous amount behind the scenes. So I won't share any of that because it's private, but the public carriers on every one of their earnings calls, they're talking about technology investments, measuring metrics about their adoption and what's going on there. So when we think about this, we know the carriers are investing now, as the great part is the NMFTA Digital Council is creating industry standards. So the great part is now these connections can start to unify the capabilities. So we can create for our customers and the carriers the same type of just systems and deliverables across all of our customers and carriers. So not just that one carrier for that one customer be able to do that one thing, which has kind of been the case in this industry. Now, whether it's invoices, which the invoice standard is going to come out here soon, we can now make that available to a broad base of customers. And I think we're going to see quick carrier adoption over the coming months and quarters into these standards, because it just allows a way simpler way to get more customers to access it. You're definitely going to have your large enterprises that can write to these standards, set up all their carriers, but we're looking to be that solution where now we can take these capabilities and make it available to our over 7,000 customers and make it just a seamless click in the button. No developer needed. You can just digitize these things right out of the gate. So we're really looking forward to the rapid pace of adoption. And just shout out, I hope all the carriers move quickly on this invoice one. I think this is going to be a big one for the industry. EDI 210 is great. It works, but it's great for large shippers.
It's a lot of labor across the board. And to your point, like if I'm only doing 10 bills a month with a shipper, now I'm going to go labor and, include EDI costs in that too and manage that. You're just adding layers to the complexity cake.
And we'd love to see it before we need to be buying more pizza parties or things for EDI departments, because I know we sometimes overload them, but it's that brew of it. There must be a better way, right? And having credentialed APIs can make it accessible to everyone, overnight.
Now, let's talk about this. I mentioned customer experience a little bit. Joe, you've been working hand in hand with our customers as we've kind of gone through, alpha and into beta testing phases with payments. What's some of the feedback you're hearing, or when we retro some of these customers, what's some of the stuff you're gleaning right from this tool and what it's brought to them?
Yeah, it's been exciting to see the early traction that some of our customers are experiencing with payments just as a foundational layer. When you ask someone, do you need payments? Of course not. They pay their bills, their business and operations. But if you're able to digitize payments and speed the acceptance and speed the reconciliation, not even talking about automation, it provides a tremendous amount of value. So a lot of our customers are really excited to save their preferred credit card, save their preferred bank account, click once and pay all their pros and all their carriers within minutes.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful tool.
Now, that's my favorite part about it. And like, I realize that our community is all shippers that work directly with carriers, but I still think there's some things out there that I absolutely love that, 3PL markets can provide. And it's that, I don't want to call ours a single payer option, but it's a single button to pay option, right? Which I think is huge, because I really feel like what we're doing is like, listen, when it comes to the king of gas stations, there's like your QTs, Sheets, Buc-ee's of the world. Can we be the Buc-ee's of the convenience experience for shippers who are already needing to get that product to come in and have the best-in-class experience, translate everything, and have it be as easy as possible and not dread, like, not to say anything about emblems with K's and circles in them, but you go in there and you kind of dread it, as opposed to other experiences where you like being in there. And that's what I think our customers get with our experiences: less hoops to jump through, a cleaner experience. I think adding the payments on is going to really fortify that and deliver that true end-to-end solution that we've been kind of spouting off here.
The more that the shippers adopt our embedded payments, the more valuable it's going to become to our community of customers. And so we haven't even really touched the surface of how freight audit works in conjunction with payments.
Yeah.
If the pros exactly match the amount and match the carrier, we understand that that bill is ready to be paid. So we can pull that bank account, pull that credit card information, and there doesn't even need to be a human in that loop because you've approved the audit automatically. You can schedule that payment to be facilitated, and accountants, CFOs, controllers can actually move on to more strategic things.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Now I'm going to take the Nostradamus cap and hand it to Chris. Between all your work you're doing with the NMFTA, what you're seeing with what we're doing with the product, what are some things you think are going to transpire in the next year to two with these host of changes and what you're seeing the carriers do? You've been in this industry a long time now. You've been on this shipper direct side. You've been on the 3PL side. You've consulted with them. You know how they think, how they react. What are you seeing that's going to happen with these agreed upon changes? I'll say it's not like just one carrier leading the pack. They've all kind of agreed to go down this path finally.
Yeah. So looking out, I don't want to say it's there because I think it is, but I've always thought, about 1-2 years later, we're going to see this, kind of transformation start to happen. I truly think we're just about there to kind of see a technology inflection point in the LTL industry. If you look back at Parcel, they have solved a lot of what we're trying to solve. And that's where, if you listen to all the stuff I've talked about, it's the Parcel-like experience. We started working on that years ago with everything being barcoded
too. So it's easier
exactly.
to transmit change when you're dealing with 2 kids on the playground versus 80.
Absolutely. And again, those 2 ones can really drive and dictate to the shipping community where LTL is a lot more competitive. So again, LTL carriers want to meet the shipper where they're at. And I think that's where MyCarrier and possibly other, solutions come into the market because now they can deliver these things to where it's not, hey, Mr. Shipper, I need you to do these things. There are solutions that are no code, easy to adopt, that allow you to create outsized value for both parties. And if you look, there's always been this talk about shipper of choice. And what does it really mean in the LTL community? And there's been a couple things you can do, dwell time and some stuff. But, compared to the truckload market, it doesn't feel there's quite as much you can do, where a lot of it is because of the sheer quantity of transactions. It comes to the manual processes. And this is what's going to allow shippers to be thinking, how do I best enable my carrier? How do I make sure I operate well for them so I can have favorable pricing? So instead of just negotiating, you're now looking at adopting. Think from the carrier perspective. A lot of shippers think about their processes. When all of these small and mid-market shippers are paying carriers, sending their paper checks, sending the paper remittance, every single one of those is having to be manually cashed, applied, and whatever information you give, you're now creating the ability to be able to automate the carrier processes. And that's really, I think, what's going to drive this, next wave of digitization, because you're going to see the benefits and adoption through just making it accessible.
And it's not a simple equation. You think $1 billion carrier doing pros at $300 per transaction on an annual basis, that is a massive amount of data that they have to deal with and reconcile.
It absolutely is. And I mean, we've sat down with them, and it's no pretty process. They buy third-party tools like, what was it, Bill Trust or Radius. They're not wanting to continue to staff up these large departments. And like, you think about everything that goes into it. There's a traffic department. There's the billing and payables and receivable departments in all of this, right? If they're not paying on time, you got to use sales reps' time. So like, I think the more, you guys are right, the more we can drive people to adopt this and use it, I don't think they realize all the little collateral this takes off the plate as it goes through the life cycle.
It's going to create so much. It's going to create so much more efficiencies across this market and across this transaction. And I think as business leaders understand that money is in fact data, right? Like a consumer's money isn't sitting at Fort Knox. It's literally just numbers on a screen. So when businesses understand that their data, their money is data, and they can move it at the speed of clicks, bits, and bytes, that's going to make the whole supply chain more efficient.
Yep. And I was just working with one who picked up a new vendor account. And that vendor account took him from 3% of freight as an expense of sales to 7% because he didn't understand the address profile and the new requirements. And all of a sudden, he's paying all these extra fees that he didn't anticipate, and now trying to figure out how to not lose a new customer.
That's how you become not the shipper of choice.
Yes. So these tools are out there. I know MyCarrier is on the forefront. We're not the only game in town. But what we're doing to automate and digitize the industry is to literally make your life easier as a shipper, but also the carriers or your delivery partners, right? They have to labor a lot if you do not transact with them in a digital way. They have to get that information somehow. They have to create those records somehow. So this is a way or a process or pathway for both parties, I think, to seamlessly exchange that information and kind of create that win-win outcome.
Bobby hit the nail on the head there. We spend so much time thinking about both parties. It's not just about one. And I know, and I think that's been a fault in our industry where there are either, whether it be professional services, brokers, software companies that really think about one party and create a business model around one party in solving their problems and then pass that on downstream. And there's so many unintended consequences for that party they're servicing because of the lack of the thought. So that is some area we spend so much time thinking about.
Stop passing the buck in LTL.
Exactly. It seems like that's been the case. It's frustration. We spend just an enormous amount of time thinking through both sides of the equation. Again, that takes us a bit longer to deliver these things, but we want to deliver them end to end and not just deliver for one party. So that's why we're excited about this milestone, because from when you came on board to when we delivered this, it was quite a long time, even though the technology was there, because we had to think through our carrier partners. That's where, Bobby, you were instrumental in all those calls and understanding our carrier partners, because we didn't want to roll out. We could have raced to you shippers and provide you a solution really quick out of the box that will allow you to digitize and pay the carriers, but it wasn't going to solve for both parties.
Nope.
And the amount of information that we're capturing on both sides of that transaction is going to benefit both parties, because there's an economy of scale when you start to understand the attributes of all these accessorials, the intervals of the invoice, the intervals of the payment. We're going to be able to surface those to both parties, and it'll benefit the transaction.
That was an interesting conversation, right? You come on board and be like, hey, we have a great technology. You spent 4 years building the state of the art, back end and payments. And now it's like, okay, great. Now let's hurry up and wait and then go make a bunch more. But I think that's the exciting part of just how many customers and carriers we're going to make your technology available to.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time.
Sweet, man. Well, cool. Thanks for hopping on and joining us. And, if you're having problems with payments or just want to make life easier with payments, I encourage you to come check out MyCarrier.